Hey guys, good evening everybody. It's real late at night right now here Central Time. It's 10:30 p.m. Central Time in the United States. And right now you're looking at a live radar image of Hurricane Irma as she churns her way north towards the Florida Keys in the western most part of Florida. So we're going to look into this a little bit more and see what we can see here. Let's see. So for starters, we can identify a couple of things in this image. The first is the eye right here. Here's the eye of Hurricane Irma. And here's her rain bands that wrap all the way north, all the way up to Naples, actually, is where they're starting to get hit by some of Hurricane Irma's rain bands. Now, as Hurricane Irma works its way up to the north into portions of Florida, the biggest concern as of now is going to be the storm surge, especially here from Key West and along the Florida Keys here, where storm surge in all these areas could reach up to as high as 13 feet in some places. And they're talking 6 to 13 feet in some places. And that isn't just for the Florida Keys. That's all the way along the western portion of Florida and the western coast of Florida. So we're going to be watching that very closely as Hurricane Irma slowly makes her way north towards the Florida Keys and ultimately Florida. So another thing that we're going to be worried about is the strong wind gust that comes with Irma. To point that out specifically here and to keep point that here, here's velocity image. And in velocity, this is our best way at looking into a storm and seeing how strong the wind gust might be in a storm. So here, the radar transfers the data that it gets when it scans a storm into knots, and that's all color-coded into one image that is updated approximately every, I'd say, 2 minutes based on how fast the radar is circulating. The radar itself is circulating, and that's what we're seeing right here. This is the product that we get. It looks kind of messy, but it all makes sense, and I'll explain it just briefly here. So along here is, you can see where my cursor is. It says knots here at the top. Down here you can see it's negative 140 knots, and at the top here it's 140 knots. So what we're going to be looking for is these higher quantities of numbers, which is going to be primarily these numbers that are that create the white or very, very, I'd say, light purple or light red color here in the storm. And to point those out here and give you kind of an idea of how strong the winds actually are in Hurricane Irma, right now, according to the National Hurricane Center, Hurricane Irma is a Category 3 storm. So she is a Category 3, and that's coming off of the northern coast of Cuba. So what we're going to be looking at right here is the northeast part of the eye wall and the southwest part of the eye wall. These areas hold the strongest wind gust according to radar. Approximate idea of where that would hit, that's right around or just to the north of Key West, and then again hitting maybe Naples, Cape Coral, Punta Gorda in the next I'd say 12 to 24 hours, depending on how fast this storm is actually going. So to point out winds estimates or exact numbers, let's get to this. Right down here in this box right here, you will see it's the second box right here. If you follow my cursor from the eye of the storm down, right here is where you're going to look, and I'm going to be talking about that number, so pay attention to that number. Okay, on the northeast side of the storm, you can see 120 knots there. That's about 140 miles per hour, if I'm not mistaken. There's 121. That's about 140 or 42 miles per hour there. So we're averaging around of about 135 to 140 or so miles per hour. The winds have definitely increased from what we can see here on Hurricane. Sorry about that. Anyway, so they have increased from what we can see here on Hurricane Irma, and we're going to continue to watch this and see if these actually do increase even a little more as they work into warmer waters. The National Hurricane Center right now is saying Irma is a Category 3 with 120 mile an hour wind gust, and that was updated at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So that was about 30 minutes ago, actually. So National Hurricane Center most recently is saying that these are about 120 mile an hour wind gusts, which is agreeable considering that radar tends to be off the ground. So what we are seeing here on radar with Irma itself, seeing those 120 knot to 125 knot mile per hour, or about 140 mile an hour, is probably aloft as opposed, or aloft or up in the air as opposed to what they're getting on the surface. So if we have a summer thunderstorm here in Illinois that is going through the state or coming into a community, radar shows the meteorologists at the National Weather Service what the storm winds are above the surface. Typically, we don't know the exact wind gust at the surface, and that's why we rely on trained weather spotters to relay that information. With a hurricane, it's a little bit different, but I'll get to that in just a second. But if we have a storm going through, the National Weather Service job is to estimate whether or not the winds aloft are making it to the ground, number one, and whether or not the winds that are making it to the ground are strong or similar speeds to the winds that are actually in the storm. So the winds that we're seeing in the storm right here, let me rephrase this to you, are probably not the winds that they are seeing on the surface. So if I'm in a boat, heaven forbid, down here in northeast of the eye itself, I'm probably not seeing 140 mile an hour wind gusts. I'm probably seeing 135 to 130 mile an hour wind gust, which is a Category 4, I believe, storm. So give or take, about 5 miles per hour within this storm. So at 11 o'clock p.m., which was 10 o'clock p.m. Central Time, the movement was northwest at 6 miles an hour. And what we're seeing with Hurricane Irma is she is moving northwest right now, but we are going to see Hurricane Irma kind of take a shift up. Why is that? Well, high pressure over the Atlantic has been pushing her to the south and not allowing her to go north. That is why she is hitting Florida, because of high pressure over the Atlantic. Low pressure here in the south, particularly Alabama, Mississippi, and that region, this low pressure there is pulling Irma to the north. So we're seeing Irma. She's working northwest right now, as most of the tracks on here on this radar are showing. But overnight, or even here in just the next 2 hours, Hurricane Irma is going to start, or is already starting to work her way more on a northerly track, or a northwest track, more than a direct northwest track. So if she were to continue off to the northwest, there is plenty of argument that she could re-strengthen and hit the same place that Hurricane Harvey did. But she is not going to work into the Gulf of Mexico by any means, because this low pressure up here is going to pull Hurricane Irma to the north. So there's absolutely no way in I guess modern science, to put it bluntly, that Hurricane Irma is going to work her way that way with the type of weather system that we have worked or draped over the southern United States. There's also no way that she's going to turn over southern Florida and work back up to the northeast because of the high pressure, the big dome of high pressure that we have stationed over over the Atlantic. So this high pressure is pushing Irma away. This low pressure is pulling Irma in. So we're not going to see her move into the Gulf of Mexico. We're not going to see her move back into the Atlantic. It's kind of definite at this point. It's a definite this hurricane, that this cyclone is going to hit Florida. We have pretty much total certainty that it hits the western part of Florida, absolute certainty that it hits the Florida Keys, and that's what we are going to be watching, and that's what we have at this point. Now, remnants of Irma could work as far north as southern Illinois, which doesn't affect most of the northern Illinois region, but most of the southern Illinois region could affect Kentucky, southern portions of Indiana, and such. But north of those regions are probably going to be mostly cloud cover, and they could get a little bit of rain, but I don't see them getting as torrential rain as remnants of Hurricane Harvey caused either. So, also to point out something else here, we're going to go ahead and switch over to models here. Give me just a second. Let's see if we can do this. Here we go. Okay, so we're gonna switch over to models here and see. Did that switch over? Yep, here we go. So this is Cod Meteorology. Awesome site to go to and use to track this. You can't really see it right now, but this northern arc right over here, that is Hurricane Irma. This is all unassociated to Hurricane Irma. This is not Hurricane Irma activity, nor is this out here in the Gulf of Mexico. So no, Hurricane Irma is not going to turn, and no, it is not going to go into the Gulf of Mexico because of that. This right here is strictly Hurricane Irma, and we can see that a bit more evidently as we work up into about tomorrow at about, I don't know, I'd say, I don't know, really, but moving into tomorrow, specifically, we see this starts to work up. Here's the eye. This is all Hurricane Irma now. Now you can make the argument that this is all Hurricane Irma. She's still not going to move to the west anymore. She's still not going to move off to the east. So this is all Hurricane Irma, but the track is going to specifically stay the same as it works up the Florida coast. So here we are working into the late hours of Sunday and very early hours of Monday morning. Hurricane Irma is approaching what would be, let's see, Tampa, I believe. So it maintains a very strong eye structure as she works up towards the Tampa area. Hurricane Irma will continue off over Tampa, losing that eye structure a bit, which is good news because she might be losing a bit more of her wind gust, but the storm surge is still probably going to be Jurassic in the Tampa area, and even working up the coast. So she regains that eye structure a bit more, but as she goes on to land, she kind of just loses all of her punch, and at this point she is most likely a tropical storm or a tropical depression. You can see dumping tons of rain across Alabama, portions of Mississippi, all the way into Georgia and into South Carolina. Might be even seeing 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gust in this area too, especially the southern, especially the southern portions of it. And tornadoes can also be possible in any tropical cyclone, and that would be back into southern portions of Georgia, southern South Carolina, and northern Florida. And then Hurricane Irma works her way up, kind of losing her punch, and let's switch sectors here. Into the Midwest, go to hours 60, So at that point, here is of Irma, should we say? I guess Nam Nest is starting to pick up. A bit of rain moving into northern Illinois and giving some rain to Arkansas, Mississippi, western Tennessee, and tornadoes also could be possible. Potentially, very, very low chance of tornadoes at this point in the tropical cyclone. But we see light rain, then we see the shades of heavier rain, and then heavier rain back off to the south and east. So let's go over to the National Hurricane Center and see what they've been saying. It's a pretty much definite track with what we've just saw. You can see a storm as it heads into Georgia. We mentioned that. And then a depression as it heads into the Mississippi Valley and up into portions of Illinois. So this looks pretty spot on. National Hurricane Center has been doing a very good job at tracking this. So our next concern is pointed out to Jose, who is a Category 4 storm. Jose will not make an impact on America. We can make speculation that maybe it turns. It does not look at this point like it makes an effect on America. Now, Hurricane Jose has already made somewhat of an effect on the Lesser Antilles over here. And National Hurricane Center is starting to see it kind of turn around here and could make a well, we'll have to watch this. This is an interesting one. We could see this work into the Bahamas and maybe even see it turn around and affect Florida, which would be a very bad situation. And then the next concern, after Harvey's gone, after Katia is gone, and after Irma is gone, Jose's moved out or is moving towards us. Here we go. 30% chance of a tropical cyclone in the next 48 hours, but in the next 5 days, a medium 50% chance of a tropical cyclone in the next 5 days. That's located all the way out there. So what that does at this point is still up in the air. But this is around where Irma started. This is around where Jose started. So it's worth watching. Why is it worth watching? Because most of these tropical cyclones we've seen move up into this area. So this is a concern. This is the third disturbance that we've seen in the past, 1 week that has developed in the Atlantic. This is just not a good storm year for the Atlantic. So that will be the next potential problem for the Atlantic is what goes on out here with this disturbance. Number one, 30% chance of a tropical cyclone. But moving into the northeastern North Pacific, you can see no tropical cyclones expected in the next 48 hours. So our only situation is in the Atlantic. Hurricane season in the Atlantic is at its peak. So we're going to be seeing this amount of hurricanes. Did we know that they were going to affect America this simultaneously? No, we did not. Do we want them to affect America this simultaneously? No, we do not. We've already seen the disastrous effects of Harvey in Texas and Irma being a stronger, a bigger, and more well-defined and a longer tracked storm is going to unfortunately probably make a more lasting effect on Florida than Harvey did on Texas. Don't get me wrong, what Harvey did to Texas was very, very, very heartbreaking, very bad for the families in Texas. And what Irma is going to do most likely in Florida is going to be very similar or maybe even a little bit worse. Once again, Jose at this time is still up in the air. We don't exactly know what happens with Jose, but we see him moving up. Whether or not that high pressure system moves out of the area or stays in the area is going to really dictate what goes on with Hurricane Jose. So there's a chance that Hurricane Jose could, turn around here and start to work its way up to the eastern side of Florida rather than the western side, or affect the Georgia, South Carolina coastline. That would be worst case scenario at this point. Probably won't happen. Once again, I'm going to reiterate that several times. That probably will not happen. Jose probably will not hit the United States homeland. Um, but could affect, areas south of the Bahamas or the Bahamas itself. It's already affected and is likely still sort of affecting the Lesser Antilles. And, they've been affected a lot too by Irma, by now Jose, and soon could be affected by what goes on out here in the Atlantic. Now, with this disturbance out here, I don't want anybody to get their hopes up at this point. The weather systems in the United States and in the northern Atlantic are going to change so much over the next week that whether or not this even makes it to the Lesser Antilles or even develops into a tropical cyclone is still up in the air. So this could very well just turn up to the north before it even gets to the Lesser Antilles or any of these islands out here. Could it very well track the same track as Jose or Irma and affect some of these areas? Could it hit? It could also hit, Venezuela, the Ghanas, or I don't know how to say those down there, or it could hit Central America as well. I don't see it really moving back towards Africa at all. I see it moving more towards that way. This out. It says showers and thunderstorms associated with a tropical wave located a few hundred miles south of Cabo Verde Islands have shown some signs of organization today. Environmental conditions are expected to support at least some additional development, and a tropical depression could form in the next couple of days. While the systems move generally northwestward over the eastern Atlantic Ocean. So once again, northwestward, the same track that Jose and Irma have tracked. Not saying that this doesn't, turn randomly out of nowhere, but that is still a possibility. So I just wanted to show you guys what's going on with Irma and how this is all playing out. If you have any questions, you can comment down below in this video or on Facebook if you're watching. Message me on there or comment on this video on Facebook. So thanks for watching, and questions you free to ask and I'll answer them. Thank you for watching.